I want to welcome you all to Montalvo. There's so many familiar faces. This feels like a great day of us all just being together. We have friends who've come from LA. They've come from Northern California and even Morocco. So I want to welcome you to Montalvo. My name is Kelly Seacat, and I'm the director of the Lucas Artist Program, and this is a long time coming. This panel feels like something we've been sort of incubating in our minds for many, many years, and I've, the show of hands of who's a past artist in this room or current artist and fellow. We start to know who are the people who've pushed us to sort of think in this direction and really get honest with a lot of our own history here at Montalvo. So before we begin, I want to take a moment and acknowledge that we're gathered on the unceded lands of the Ohlone people. And Montalvo takes great sort of efforts to share our gratitude for the honor to steward this land and open this land as a place for convening of creative minds, creative ideas, and push that Ohlone spirit forward. So we're constantly thankful for the Ohlone villages, past, present, and future. And this summer, month ago, we opened an exhibition with a permanent land acknowledgement. That's a 5-point AR path throughout the grounds. So if you have time today and you want to take a walk, you'll be able to go through and see the exhibition. It was joined by many artists who also have works on the grounds. I want to thank you all for taking your Sunday. It's going to be a great day to have us all here. This has been the 20th anniversary year for the Lucas Artist Program. As many of you know, residency at Montalvo started in 1939, but it was in the early 2000s when we opened the LAP. We were an active concert house, we were an active wedding center, and so the board really got together and decided, is this something we're going to do at Montalvo or not? And they made a real commitment. Two artists, two supporting artists, and maybe not entirely embracing what that meant, but I think in the end of the day they did, because the facility that was created works incredibly well to support many different creative disciplines and voices to come and spend time and think with us. When artists are selected to the program, which many of you know, they're coming in and out of the program. We started our 20th anniversary celebration this year with the arrival of Hello, Goodbye, Hello. It's a publication we created for the field. We worked long and hard on it. I believe we started in 2018. And we have about 30 different voices talking about what it's like to spend time in a space like this, what a residency space means to the life of an artist or to the life of a creative. What have been our learnings? What have been our takeaways? What are the mistakes we made that we hope nobody else will have to make? And what were some of the great sort of successes we felt we had? There's copies of the book if you're interested. But then as we thought about the 20th anniversary and what felt most important, at least for myself as the director of the program, I really wanted to see us do something that felt significant to acknowledge the Asian American artists who have come and spent time on this property. Knowing the history of this property, the history of the senator who built the property, and the feedback I've gotten over my 17 years as the residency director, it was absolutely essential that this was one of the programs. And I turned to my colleague, Judy Dennis, our residency manager. I said, would you ever be interested in a show like this? Knowing she had a real interest to be curating. And then I had a lunch with James Leventhal. And James said, hey, would you ever be interested in a collaboration? And I said, yeah, well, I've been thinking. And he said, oh, so have I. And so, as great minds alike, we can't be more grateful to the partnership we've had with the ICA. It's been incredible. I think it's been incredible for both our organizations. If you haven't been to see the show, I don't know how we're going to get there today, but it closes today. It's incredible. It's really a knockout. And I want to thank Zoe Latzer and Judy Dennis for co-curating it. I want to thank all of the artists. Many of them are here with us. It opened in March. We've had a film screening here a couple of months ago. I see TT in the room, and It closes today. So this was an important exhibition for us. We then opened our summer exhibition, Future Dreaming, and now we're here with our closing symposium. So again, I need to thank Judy Dennis. I need to thank the LAP team who galvanized around her when I went away on vacation to make sure everything was in order for today. I think we're going to have a great day. I think we're going to have 3 really incredible panels and conversations. There'll be time for Q&A in each one. Each one's been quite well structured, and I just want to do a shout out to Michelle Carlson, to Jeff Chang, and to Christine Wong Yap for organizing each of these panels, because these are 3 significant partners, thought partners, that we feel we've had over many, many years in and out of the program who've helped us get to this point. So thank you for being here.
Good morning. Welcome to the closing symposium for Place, Reckonings by Asian American Artists. It's been a great run, and I would also like to personally thank James Leventhal and my co-curator, Zoe Latzer. I see you. And all the ICA staff as well for their dedication and commitment to this exhibition. I would also like to thank Kelly Seacat, Director of the Lucas Artist Program, and Angela McConnell, Director of Montalvo Arts Center, and my Montalvo colleagues. Without them, the exhibition and related programs, including Reckonings in Film and this symposium, would not have been possible. Both institutions continually strive to honor all bodies and stories, illustrating how the arts can open conversations and deepen understanding. Inspired by Kathy Park Hong's book, Minor Feelings, an Asian American Reckoning, we invited 17 leading contemporary artists to present their powerful viewpoints and their stunning work. All of the artists in the exhibition, as Kelly mentioned, have been artists in residence of the Lucas Artists Program. Many of these artists are here today, and I would like to ask them all to stand up so we can thank each of you. And I would also like to ask TT and Genevieve to stand up as well. The intention of this exhibition is to honor and uplift the diverse voices of artists of East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, and Pacific Islander ancestries. As we anticipated, Place raised several issues that invite further reflection and discussion as a community. This symposium is an opportunity to take a deeper dive into 3 of those topics. The first topic that we will be discussing this morning is, what does it mean to be an Asian American artist in this present time? But before I introduce Jeff Chang, who will be moderating the panel, I wanted to let you all know that Phung Huynh was unfortunately unable to come today due to an urgent family matter that she had to attend to. But we're extremely grateful to Bruce Yonemoto, who has graciously agreed to join this incredible panel of artists. So, Jeff Chang's first book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation, was named one of the best nonfiction books of the last quarter century. His other books include Total Chaos, The Art and Aesthetics of Hip-Hop, Who We Be, A Cultural History of Race in Post-Civil Rights America, and We Gon Be Alright, Notes on Race and Resegregation. His next project is a cultural biography of Bruce Lee called Water Mirror Echo, Bruce Lee and the Making of Asian America. He's a national leader in narrative and cultural strategy, cultural organizing, and advocacy for cultural justice. Jeff co-founded Culture Strike, now the Center for Cultural Power, Color Lines, and the Webby-nominated May 19th project. He also helped write the Cultural New Deal alongside other artists and culture bearers. Please join me in welcoming Jeff.
Jenifer Wofford, Bruce Yanamoto, Jalena Keane Lee. Thanks so much, Judy and Kelly. So what does it mean to be an Asian American artist now, in 2024? We're now in the middle of a decade in which Asian Americans, Americans of Asian descent, are more visible than they've ever been. And of course, we have one of them running for president. And the other presidential candidate has been very central to whipping up the discourse and the hysteria that's led to violence against Asian Americans. At the same time, we've seen a cultural renaissance amongst Asian American artists, among artists, screenwriters, filmmakers, actors, writers, that have generated many new ways to be seen, that have been claiming our spaces and that have been creating narratives of our survivance, to borrow an idea from the indigenous scholar Gerald Weisner. So Judy and Zoe named this show Place, Reckonings by Asian American Artists. And it might be good to kind of unpack those two words, place and reckonings, yeah? Place, so we're sitting here in this place, which was the estate of James Duval Phelan, streets and monuments still named after him in San Francisco, who spent much of his political career actually actively agitating against Asian presence in California and in the US, actively fanning the flames of the Chinese Exclusion Act, alien land laws against Japanese Americans, and much, much more. So we're on native land that passed into the ownership of an avowed racist, and that's place, right? We're sitting here in the carriage house where he kept all of his cars, which Judy tells me there was a gigantic turntable here because he didn't like to back his car out. He had to have the turntable move his car around. So that's James Duval Phelan. This is the place we're in right now, right? Reckonings. Reckonings is such an interesting word. Reckonings means reaching a settlement, paying a debt, right? It means a clearing of accounts in a lot of ways. But it also has to do with navigation. And for somebody like me, right, with Native Hawaiian ancestry, that means a lot. This idea of being able to navigate across vast stretches of deep, dark blue with only the stars, right, as your guide, right? Navigating. How do we navigate ourselves into the future? And so it foregrounds people's ideas, our experiences, our expert judgments, our opinions. And that's what we're going to hear today from this amazingly multi-generational panel that we have with us today. Again, Jalena, Jen, and Bruce. So I'm going to introduce each of them one by one. Where did I put the, oh, here it is. It's right in front of me. And they'll share with you a little bit of their work, and then we'll dive right into a conversation. There'll be a little bit of time for you to be able to ask questions, and hopefully we'll come out a little bit smarter out of all of this. Okay, so first, Jalena Keane Lee is a filmmaker who was named the 2023 Adobe and Sundance Woman to Watch. She's currently touring her first feature-length documentary, Standing Above the Clouds, about the Kukiaia and Mauna Kea, the guardians of the mountain, which follows a Native Hawaiian mother and her daughter activists. The film premiered at Hot Docs in 2024, where it won the Bill Nempton Award for Best Impact Social Doc. She also co-founded Breaktide Productions, an all-women of color production company that has won 2 Cannes Lion Awards for branded content. Jalena Keane Lee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be on this panel and to be talking with you all. I'll just give a short introduction. We're going to see a trailer for Standing Above the Clouds, the feature-length film, and still doing some tinkering with the trailer, so you're the first audiences to see this cut of it. And I was born and raised in the Bay Area and have family in Hawaii on Moku Keawe, or the Big Island, where Mauna Kea is and where this film takes place. But being from the Bay Area, kind of raised in this place with so much of the Black Panther legacy, I think really inspired me to want to document the women's side of movements. And as we know, Black Panther membership was majority women, but in our visual understanding of that time, it's a lot of images of men and a male version of what power might look like. So with this project, I really wanted to document history unfolding in real time and make sure that the wahine, or the women's perspective, was shown so that future generations know the contributions that women have in movement making and movement building.
Mauna Kea is our actual ancestor. We are related to this mountain. We are taught to take care of this place.
The Department of Land and Natural Resources issued a notice to proceed for the 30-meter telescope.
It would be one of the largest moving structures ever constructed.
There's already 13 up on the summit. But this time, it was going to be the one too many, the one too big.
Hundreds have gathered at the base of Mauna Kea Access Road.
I want to know, if we are in mid-prayer, will you just arrest us in mid-prayer? That's all. When you're having to make plans with your own children on what happens if the police come. The women are going to remember forever, and so will we.
It is not about fighting something. It is about loving something.
A lot of things we do, it's like you don't really have a choice. If we don't do this, then no one else might. So if it's our responsibility, it's our responsibility.
Mauna Awa Kea is an elder. And we take care of our land as we take care of our ohana, our family. How could we not stand for this?
We also have with us Jenifer K. Wofford.
Hi.
Please give her a hand. Jenifer is a San Francisco contemporary artist and educator whose multidisciplinary work investigates hybridity, history, calamity, and global culture, often with a humorous bent. She is a Lucas Arts Fellow, a YBC 100 honoree, and her work has been featured at the Asian Art Museum and all around the world. She's also 1/3 of the Filipino-American artist trio MOB, Male Order Brides, with Rianne Immaculada Estrada and Eliza Neneng Barrios, and MOB's work, Chachilog, appeared in the play show. Please welcome Jenifer Wofford.
Hi, gang. I guess let's just get into the slides. I guess the one thing I could say to preface it is that what was my work looks like a lot of different things, but what I will stick to focusing on is the collaborative work I've done with Eliza and Rihanna as Mob. What we showed at Place were these 3 images, which were in fact extracted from a much larger presentation called Chatsilog Revisited, which was exhibited at the Asian Art Museum in 2022 as part of the large Carlos Villa show that was happening there 2 years ago. Next slide. Also, these were shot here at the Lucas Artist Residency, and I think we gave Judy Dennis a heart attack. I know we did, installing this in one of the very clean, just renovated studios. So this is how it was actually presented at the Asian Art Museum. What you see happening on the 4 pedestals in the foreground is 4 inset video monitors showing a piece that we shot with Carlos, who is a legendary Bay Area artist and activist who passed in 2013. Who was sort of a mentor. We like to kind of call ourselves Carlos's angels because he did bring the 3 of us together. And we did this one kind of amazing piece together that was, well, maybe not that amazing, but it was small and intimate. And then it was a really beautiful thing to reflect on after he passed in 2013. So when the Asian Art Museum asked us to be in this show honoring Carlos, we decided to revisit that piece and extend it. So next slide, please. So these are stills from the original 2010 version of the project, where I was living in Prague, Carlos and Eliza were in San Francisco, Rianne was in LA, and we were doing this all in iChat, which is why the project was called Chatsilog. Remember iChat, old time ago? Yeah, and so I think, pre-Zoom, this felt sort of like, it was such a strange moment of its era. Now we just kind of take being in boxes for granted. Next slide, please. And so here we are shooting in the Lucas residency. You can see that we covered the entire Studio 21 in fake, sort of in temporary contact paper. And then we had Packard Jennings, former Lucas fellow as well, be our videographer and photographer. I should also mention that Chatsilog, this term silog in the Philippines is what you append to anything you're having for breakfast. Silog is basically short for eggs and rice. So if you're having like bangus, a kind of fish, it's bangsilog. If you're having tocino, it's tosilog. And if you're having a chat, it's chatsilog, yes. Okay, so what you see in the foreground is a lot of fake chat meats that we had made out of Sculpey, which are vaguely disgusting but kind of fun. Next slide, please. And so you can see some close-ups of the actual sculptures that we made. All 3 of us were actually trained as sculptors and ended up kind of fumbling our way into more of an interdisciplinary performative practice. But I think people think we're performance artists when we're not really actually that. And so, yes, we have this one on the right, which, in light of the Paris Olympics, we would call this one La Défense, because it did look like sort of the square arc there. And so these were on we're being hella Asian, so these were on little rotating Lazy Susans. So the sculptures were rotating on top of the videos that were playing. Next slide, please. And here's a very short clip of the video that focused on Carlos. And you can see the sculpture rotating above his head. And I mean, we could spend an hour just speaking about Carlos's legacy, but we will not. I will hand the mic over to Bruce. But he is sort of a pivotal figure in the conversations we're having here today, I think, in terms of an earlier generation, an Asian American artist who really saw value in having these conversations. And so the mob, in our own demented way, wanted to find ways to pay homage to him.
Thanks so much. We're really honored to have with us today Bruce Yonemoto, whose work as a video and digital media installation artist, as an educator, a writer, and curator began in the mid-1970s. He's been honored with numerous awards and grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, the American Film Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Maya Deren Award for Experimental Film and Video. He's had major mid-career survey shows at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles and in Kanazawa, Japan, among many other places. And his piece, Silicon Valley, appeared in the Place show. Welcome, Bruce Yonemoto.
Well, I want to say I was asked to be on the panel last night actually. So, but anyway, I'll go on. Anyway, what the clip I'm going to show was a piece that I collaborated with Karen Finley, and we shot here at Montalvo, and with the support of Kelly Seacat and everyone here. It was really a great experience, and I actually brought students up from UC Irvine, to work on the piece. So it was really something, and I'd like to thank the director Angela also. But so anyway, this piece focuses in on Phung, and to follow up what Jeff said, he was a racist, and he wrote these really important sort of political treatises about, the exclusion of Asians, but also it paralleled Trump's exclusion of various minorities, such people from Africa, people from the Middle East, and people from the East also. And so, so Karen and I decided to focus in on that legacy that exists here. I mean, he did good things too. Of course, he created the residency here, which is one of the oldest residencies in the United States, and the oldest one in California, definitely. But anyway, so Karen plays Trump and also Phung, but the clip will only show her playing Trump. And so what we did was we rushed to finish it before the 2016 election because we thought Hillary was going to win. And so we thought it would just be irrelevant after that. And so we rushed to have it done, and we premiered it before the election and everything like that. But of course, we still are living with this nightmare. And so anyway, it's the last part that you'll see is as shot at the Japanese American National Museum. And it features Kelly's son, Lucas Seacat, and and the narration is by George Takei, because he was in the camps, when he was like 3 or 5 maybe. And so he basically had one story to tell about the camps because he was a child, a small child. And so I knew that he could deliver this really well, and he does, you'll see. But so anyway, let's just start the clip.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. We are in serious trouble. This country is in serious trouble. We don't have victories anymore. We used to have victories, but we don't have them anymore. When was the last time you saw beating, like China in a trade deal? They beat us all the time. They kill us all the time. But I beat them all the time. I beat China all the time. When was the last time you ever saw Japan beat us? Well, they're beating us all the time. They beat us in everything. And what do? They send their cars, millions, all over. And what do? Well, we send... have you ever seen a Chevrolet in Tokyo? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, folks. They beat us at everything.
I remember that morning. In fact, I can never, ever forget that morning. It was a terrifying morning. I was in the living room looking out the front window, and I saw 2 soldiers come marching up our driveway. And I saw at the end of their rifles shiny bayonets. They stomped up to our front door at our 2-bedroom home on Garnet Street in Los Angeles and banged on the front door. It was terrifying. My father answered it, and we were ordered out of our home. What's a non-alien? That's a citizen. They couldn't even call us citizens then. We were enemy non-aliens. Why? Because of this. We were taken to the horse stables And thinking back now, I can't imagine how degrading and humiliating it must have been for my parents. To take the 3 children, one a baby, from a 2-bedroom home, and told to sleep in that narrow, smelly horse stall. I remember the barbed wire fences and the sentry tower, the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs from our barrack to the latrine. It was a racist act, pure and simple. And it was an unconstitutional act. I mean, you can't imprison people because of their race. And that was what we were imprisoned for.
Thank you all for sharing your incredible work with us. Why don't we dive right into this conversation? I wanted to maybe start with this question, maybe for Bruce first, and then if Jenifer and Jalena, if you can jump in on it. Bruce, you were there. You were there at Berkeley when the Asian American Political Alliance named Orientals, named us Asian Americans. Folks went on a bunch of different paths after that, became doctors, became politicians, went into activism, full-time organizing, and you decided to go into the arts. And so I think in some ways it's a question that really originates with you and your generation. What does it mean to think about yourself as an artist then in relationship to this idea of Asian American? I'm wondering if you can maybe take us a little bit through, how your thinking has evolved over the years. And Jenifer and Jalena, if you can maybe jump in afterwards.
Well, yeah, I mean, at that time it was called Third World Studies, right? And so that's what they began when I was there, and I started to take those classes and studied they were basically graduate students and things like that were forming this program. But the thing that I got most out of that was this idea of finding your roots and things like this. And so after I graduated, I did go and study in Japan. And so I studied in Tokyo, and I learned how to speak Japanese because, of course, I was born not so long after the World War II. And so consequently, my parents wanted us to be completely American, more American than American. And so I, had to learn Japanese and everything, but it was really an important moment for me, and I think it sort of formed in many ways who I am. But I am also a product, in terms of my art background, a product of Western philosophy, basically, art philosophy and theory. And so, the French theory, Frankfurt School, everybody. I mean, it's just Warhol and Duchamp, of course, were my sort of guiding lights and things. And so in that way, I am a product of that. And I think that now people are trying to form a decolonization, let's say, of this history and things like this. I mean, there were, of course, Fanon and Stuart Hall and people like that, of course, were, really important people to study in my generation also. But I find it really interesting right now, this moment of decolonization, and how do you do that, particularly in higher education or whatever. And so that's a question that I would like to put out there also. But some of the ways that they're trying to do it is by hiring, let's say, professors from Brazil or from other countries. But it's not their responsibility to decolonize education or decolonize the U.S., basically, because they're not from here. And so it's sort of ridiculous in a way. But I think that what we have to do is find texts from these various cultures outside of the West. And so we have to collect those and translate those and then have those as basic texts and philosophy or theories that we can actually study from and learn from. So that's what the statement that I wanted to make.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And you teach at UC Irvine,
Yes,
so
yeah.
you're in this.
Yeah, I'm active with that. Yeah, so yeah.
All the time.
But it's a problem right now, you know, and it's an interesting problem though. Yeah, yeah.
Let's come back around to that decolonization question. I know that both of you, all of us, will have a lot to say about that. Jenifer, how do you enter this question of community, artist, this sort of relationship of that? Where do you enter?
I guess I'll bring it right back to Carlos because I think for me and my generation, or our generation perhaps, like I went to SFAI in the 90s, and that was really at sort of the first wave, I think, of the multicultural movement, so to speak, for my generation. But the thing that I got very specifically out of working with Carlos Villa, and not because I think he was particularly strident about it, he just kind of emulated this thing, which is that, you know, your role as an artist is not just to like be alone in your studio making things, you know, that are commodity objects. You know, you have an obligation, maybe not an obligation, maybe honestly more of a joy, to be in community, right? So you're a community member, you're an activist, you're a scholar, but you don't have to be an academic scholar, you can be a street scholar. He valued all forms of wisdom as long as you were sharing it in community with others. And I think I learned from Carlos and through the folks that I consider myself in community with now, that it takes an incredibly broad coalition of folks to move things forward. And so you build as many alliances as you can. And so it's never about whether you're making this one singular thing for your own ego. It is very much about it. Who are you in conversation with? And how are those conversations meaningful?
Jalena?
Wow, what a question. So yeah, I'll get back to the decolonization point, I guess, a little bit later. But I think, thinking about Asian American community, I think about, on my mom's side, I'm 6th generation Chinese American, and working on Standing Above the Clouds, like, inspired me to make a film about, me and my mom and our relationship, and we got to visit some of the sites where our ancestors worked to help build the railroad. So, I was just reflecting a lot more on history and place, and also the American part of Asian American, and what is our responsibility to the people whose land that we're on, even when we have been here for a really long time. And Kapule, the young woman who's skateboarding that you saw in the clip, she talks about how, it's kind of always Indigenous people's responsibility to uphold this, even if you're like 17 and just trying to, hang out with your friends, like you still have to be the one that's on the front line. So it makes me think about, as Asian Americans, it's so important for us to see our responsibility to whatever place we are at, and to join forces with the people who are protecting the land and the natural resources that we all need to survive. And I think I feel very blessed to have been raised here, and I feel like my art has always been deeply intertwined with a politic and an idea about liberation for everyone. And I've never seen being a Asian American artist, a young woman artist, a queer artist as something that, can just be like in isolation, or just like, oh, what are my like fantasies? And although that is important, but I think making art that is community based and that is pushing towards our like collective liberation is why I love art and being an artist.
Can we dive into this decolonization thing, though? 'Cause I love how you raised this idea of the American part of Asian American, right? Because so much of the idea, or an idea, I should say, of the Asian American are trying to claim America. Whereas you're doing here a movie, Standing Above the Clouds, where we're talking about the colonization that America has done to Hawaii. And this is, of course, appearing in your work as well, Jenifer, right? In terms of thinking about the Filipino diaspora and the history of the Philippines. And Bruce, this appears, of course, too, in your work as well, right? In talking about immigrant Japanese communities all around the world and in different countries, and how they find their identity. So I really want to dive into this question of decolonization. How do you think about this very thorny, very contradictory in some ways question as you all are making your work? Did you want to start?
Oh, sure. Well, for myself, I think about the form of documentary when it comes to decolonization, because I think, like many art forms, but I think particularly documentary was used as a weapon against like a lot of indigenous communities. And it was used, people would kind of just come in, like kind of very, anthropological. Academia obviously has a lot of these like very negative roots as well, and just kind of document and then make whatever assumptions and whatever storylines they felt best suited themselves and like the audience that they had in mind, and then kind of disregard that community. And so with my work, I try my best to transmute documentary form into something that can be healing and that can return agency to the community that is being depicted in the film. So with my film, we had a really collaborative process with the people that are in it, which sounds all fancy and nice when I say it right now, but was like a very hard process and a long process, but was so rewarding. And I think when I think about, colonization and extraction, it kind of boils down to this basic thing of like, give the least but take the most. So with my work, I try to think about how can we give a lot and take just a little, and make sure that the things that we do take are regenerative and returning back to the community. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess the first thing that came to mind is not necessarily specifically my practice as a studio artist, but working on my syllabus for my new semester of classes right now. But one of the classes I'm teaching is Filipino American Arts, which is a class that I inherited from Carlos Villa, and it's been going at USF for 20 years now, which is kind of wild, because the class comes out of this moment where Carlos was told many years ago, there's no such thing as Filipino American art history. Carlos was like, let's see about that. And so Carlos constructed, I think, in his generational vision, what that class would look like. And I think that I've now been teaching it, semi-regularly since 2007. And it's a class that really has to begin with a colonial era. You have to unpack so many things that start with the Spanish occupation. And you see artists that were trained in Spain or trained in Spanish techniques or, Catholic, religious techniques. And then as the class progresses through the course of a semester, I confuse my students very much because it's a class that does start with looking at, I think, the conventions of, oil portraiture and religious painting, and it ends in a queer zombie film. Because it's how do you perform according to sort of the colonizing forces? How do you then start to assert your own identity as a culture, as a nation, maybe as a gender or multiple genders. And then by the end, how have you pushed it into this other zone that you can almost take for granted that we've had those conversations, and you can make this other thing that is both absolutely steeped in these politics, but also not needing to be didactic about it. And so I think that it's a joy of a class to teach, although I do not enjoy writing my syllabus. Because it does perform over the arc of several centuries, exactly this process of decolonizing these images.
Bruce, what do you see in your classroom, and how has your work evolved in terms of this question of decolonization over the years?
Well, yeah, I think looking back over my work, I do feel that most of it, of course, is dealing with this idea of decolonization, because, I want to bring in Asian faces, basically, and people into my work. And so I've been, from the beginning, I could do a plug right now. This early work, the first work that Norman and I actually got NEA funding for was Green Card and American Romance. And it's on, if you go to eFlux online, just put eFlux in, and then you put in, and it shows you this menu, and you put in film. And so you could watch Green Card till the end of this month. So I would like you to see that, because I think it's an important piece for these ideas that we're talking about right now. But another thing is that I'm trying to encourage native speakers, or like in Japan, let's say, for example, Koki Tanaka. I'm trying to encourage, because he's a writer and artist, and he was the youngest artist to represent Japan. at the Venice Biennale. But anyway, he is a writer, and so I'm trying to encourage him to collect texts, art texts, theoretical texts that he could put into a book. And so that could be something that could be distributed and taught, you see what I mean, in universities, and art as art, you see what I mean? And so I think that will be a step towards this idea of decolonization, to bring in these texts that, will actually give meaning to art outside of the West, right? So that's what I am encouraging.
I want to maybe pivot a little bit, but kind of build a little bit more on what's underneath this idea of decolonization, which is the violence and the erasure, right? And we're living in a moment really where there's been a resurgence in Asian American identity, in part because of the violence that's been visited upon us, right? Like, if they can't distinguish between a Japanese person or a Filipino person and a Chinese person who's supposedly infecting them with some sort of sickness or disease, we're all at risk. We're all victims, and that is one of the things that lends us to embrace this idea of Asian American, right, as a sort of self-defense type of mechanism in a way. And so I guess the question that I'm asking is, in all your work, you all are dealing with violence and erasure. Silicon Valley is literal in terms of the erasure, right, of Japanese Americans from the land due to these alien land laws that people like James Phelan had passed. Mob and all of your work, right, even in the pop sense, when you're even doing bright pop images, it's against erasure, it's against violence. And clearly, obviously, in Standing Above the Clouds, it's right there, it's in your face, right? The Mauna, the telescope erasure, and the struggle of this ohana to actually survive through that, to make it through that and establish practices that they can then pass on. I've been going on way too long here. My question here is sort of, is there a way to imagine Asian Americanness beyond just simply a reaction to violence and erasure? And how do you all do it in your work? Because I see you all doing it in your work, but that might just be my glasses here. I don't know.
Is this off now? No, there
Yeah,
we go.
there
Hi. I don't know. I think I question reactiveness in general. And I think it's, if we go to like some of the sociolinguist George Lakoff talks about don't think of an elephant, sometimes reacting to the thing directly can almost make the situation worse. So I'm not saying you just sweep it under the rug either, but I do feel like there's other ways to dance around it. We watched too much breakdancing yesterday, so I'm just thinking of like, you guys watching the Olympics? We've been watching the Olympics here. But I do feel like there's this artful way in which you can move around a thing creatively and neutralize it.
You landed that. You landed that freeze very well.
That's your soft spot, right?
Yeah.
But I guess for Mob, like, we do it through humor. We do it through our own kind of weird version of female solidarity. And I think just, I don't know if there's an aesthetics of eggs and rice, but we're working on that apparently in our projects. And that is something that is just, subtle. It's not, frontline, we are Asian Americans code, but it's also like, well, this is what we're doing, and you can just come along for the ride in the aesthetics we're framing.
Well, I think we have to face it that we live in a racist society. I mean, certainly at least 50% of America, you know what I mean, is totally racist. And so, I was raised in California, which was a very conservative place. And, just white trash, Mexican, a few Asians, a few blacks. But so anyway, I mean, that's where we begin, you see what I mean? And so within the art world, I think it's important it's beginning, like you say, with these shows like at the ICA San Jose and also the ICA in LA, which I'm in those both shows. And it's beginning, but it's just the start. I mean, we need curators, we need people, you know, with voices like Thelma Golden, let's say, at the Whitney, who did the Black Male Show, which was a landmark show which broke open the art world, you know, the major art world for black artists. And it took, you know, 40 years or something like that for us to get here right now. And so, you know, I'm so happy that my black artist friends are now so successful. I mean, they're millionaires and stuff, great for them. But somebody told me, well, you'll be dead by the time, you know, Asian Americans are recognized. So it's probably true. But anyway,
let's hope not.
but I think that it's a beginning, so we need voices to really put forward, you know what I mean, our concerns. And Jeff, of course, is doing this also. And so I think that is a step that we need to take.
I think developing our collective understanding of what it means to be Asian American, like outside of violence, it's going to take a lot of personal like healing and reflection. And I think when we talk about decolonization, like a lot of times it can be so intellectualized, and it's like, no, this is something that's like a personal healing practice. And I think connecting to our ancestral like modalities of healing and ways of knowing is a really important way to do that too. And, you know, speaking with what you're just saying, like I have a lot of artist friends that were like, oh, all of a sudden people care about my work now that like our communities are being attacked. And I feel like I just really want more from us to understand that our voice and our artistic expression and our value as people is more than, you know, when funders are interested or when attacks are happening. And that, yeah, I think it's something that is going to take a lot of healing, like on an individual and collective level. And I also think it's a good time for us to recognize that, you know, mere representation is not enough. And that, yes, we don't want to be erased, but we also want to develop a understanding of Asian American that is, yeah, going towards liberation for everyone, and recognizing the ways that our struggles are interweaved and interlinked with the struggles of all marginalized people, both domestically and abroad. And I think, you know, Grace Lee Boggs and many other like phenomenal Asian American activists have really honed that in of like, it's not just about being here, but it's also about global solidarity.
If you all have questions from the audience, we're going to go to questions in just a few seconds. But I wanted to ask this one question here, which is to kind of, you've mentioned intergenerational healing. You've talked a lot about the trauma. And I guess this is a question, I guess, about our roles as artists. How do you get at that? And then what does it bring up? And then does that create more types of problems that you actually have to resolve? I think your movie is a deep study in looking at questions of intergenerational trauma. But then what comes up, right, when we're making the work around this that then we actually have to deal with? Like, is it dangerous for us to actually do that kind of work? Jalena, maybe you can start.
Oh gosh. Yeah, well, I see it as both about intergenerational trauma and healing. And Havane, who's the older daughter in my film, she talks about how, you know, this work, it's not just something that we have to heal from. And she's talking about frontline activism, like standing off against police to protect your sacred land. But, you know, it's not just something that we have to heal from, but it's also something that we heal through. And I think knowing that your people, one, are not alone, and two, can come together and can reclaim ancestral practices and can reclaim sovereignty, not only over your land, but also your own bodies and your own relationships with each other, is a deeply healing act. And not just for the Kia'i, but for anyone that was up there. Like, you went to the Mauna, right?
No, I wasn't able to.
Oh, okay. It was such a beautiful experience to be up there. And I felt like I understood what decolonization meant, like, actually in my body, and not just as like a intellectual concept or something that you study in school, but like, what does it look like if the fabric of our society is made to care for each other and not to harm, be violent, or extract from one another? And that's like a completely different, you know, worldview shift. And I think that's something that we can heal within ourselves, within our own families, both by things that are maybe, you know, traumatic and like exposing deep wounds, but I think that exposure is how you start to heal something. And yeah, maybe you don't want to do it fully out in the public all the time, and maybe some conversations and some healings are good to have, you know, at the dinner table or good to have in different settings. But I think this is the time that we need to be having those conversations, because our world is asking us all to step up to the plate to make sure that we can ensure a planet that's livable and safe for generations to come.
I think the thing that I was thinking about as you were speaking, it came up during our little Zoom that we had before this, but, and I'll get to this thought, but I think there's the solidarity work that's happening, but I think there's allowing for nuance and difference within that that's tricky. And I think that what had come up as a thread in our conversations in Zoom was this idea that even within, you know, Asia or Asian America, there's anti-indigeneity, right? And there's also lots of microaggressions within communities. We can go to the Ali Wong routine about, you know, fancy Asians, jungle Asians. And I have definitely had more than one East Asian American say to my face, well, I'm a real Asian American, you are not. And, you know, so we get into these like weird things about authenticity and this kind of nonsense that is such a waste of time. But we do need to kind of find ways to delicately unpack that. And continue to try to build coalition while allowing those conversations to happen. With young Filipino American students, I often see this yearning for a connection to indigenous roots, but also they're sometimes laying claim to indigenous traditions that aren't theirs to claim, like getting, you know, like a tribal tattoo that is not actually their tribe. So we have to talk about all the levels of that.
Yeah, I mean, approaching violence, I mean, it's scary. You know, I do feel, as a senior, I do feel scared sometimes. And, you know, I have cousins that live in San Leandro or Union City or something, that they're afraid to even go to the market or something like that because it's so violent. And so I hope everybody will vote for Kamala, because, you know, we don't want this anymore. But, you know, the violence that will come, you see what I mean? And it's very scary. And I mean, there were moments, I mean, you know, like Vincent Chin or something like that, which is horrific. And so, I mean, I think it could definitely happen again, and it will happen again. And so I don't know exactly how to deal with that violence that exists in this country, you know, with the guns and, you know, everything. I mean, it's really scary.
We only have 10 more minutes. And what I really want to do here actually is to get to the question that we came here to answer. Definitively, the three of you, right? Answer this. To get to this question, though, of what it means to be doing this work in the bodies that you're in this particular moment right now, right? The Grace Lee Boggs question, what time is it on the clock of the world? Which implies, like, what is our responsibility to ourselves, our truths, our families, our loved ones, our communities. What is the responsibility of the Asian American artists in this particular time right now? And you all have 30 seconds to answer this. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. We have ample time to answer this. But I would love to hear what you all have been thinking about with respect to that.
You know, I just did another re-listen of Jenny Odell's book. Was it called Saving Time? I always get this wrong. Saving Time, right? Yeah, and such a phenomenal book. Local Bay Area writer and artist, and I think she really kind of pulls apart all of our various conceptions of time. So I want to just sort of say, how are we talking about time to begin with? And I think also, because, yeah, she takes the book a lot of different directions. Have Jenny on stage, she'll tell you. But I think also, having just been finishing watching more Paris Olympics, I do feel, and it was concluding with the marathon. And I think that this question of the marathon versus the sprint is an interesting one, because time works very differently in both circumstances. And so I do think there's a way in which I think we're still playing a long game here. It would be nice if it were shorter. But I think within this moment, it's, you know, just definitely not stay in your lane. We're not going to work with that metaphor. But I do think that there's working with your individual truths and hopefully sensing and continuing to connect to others around that. I mean, I don't want that to sound too much like a platitude, but that's certainly where things have been happening for me in my work. I've made a couple projects that are about looking back to previous generations, for sure. whether that's the Asian Art Museum mural, which names a lot of the elders of basic Asian American art, or another project I'm doing about the Filipino diver Vicky Draves. So kind of looking at those markers as part of the trajectory of where we're heading next is somehow part of my present moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've been sort of approaching this question already, but I think, well, personally, I feel that I am an activist, and I have been sort of pushing the envelope in terms of Asian American identity throughout my career. But the thing is I think we do have to be proactive and enlist people to help us, people in high places, let's say. I mean, the museums, let's say, the major museums and stuff like that, and sort of force them to show our work and to show who we are and things like this. I mean, you go to Europe, and Europe is just beginning to approach these questions of ethnicity and things like that. They're totally racist there. And so, even more than here, which is unbelievable in terms of the art world. But so anyway, I think that it's really incumbent upon us to sort of place the work and to be activistic in terms of showing up.
Yes. It's all good. I think the clock of the world is saying it's time for liberation and it's time to move swiftly. I think, Palestine's obviously a great example of that. And I think when it comes to, people that want to represent us, it's important to let them know what representing us entails, and that we don't want our money to be funding one of the worst genocides we've seen in contemporary times. I think about Bangladesh, where a student movement just ousted a fascist government in a few weeks of protests. I'm sure there's a lot of movement building before that also. But I think the world is telling us that this is the time to be in the community and to make sure that we can all, get free, like a lot of your work talks about too. And I think when it comes to violence in our communities and the other things that we've talked about, so much of that can be traced back to the military-industrial complex and to police violence and state violence. And that's happening across the board, and it's happening to our community too. I think there's been 4 Asian American people who have been murdered by police this year. 3 of them were having mental health crises. So it's really important that we are, as artists, using our gifts to bring light to these things and to also bring light to the connections between our communities and the other communities that have been targeted by that kind of violence for a really long time.
Yes, please. One last quick question from each of you. What's next? Just what's next? What can folks see from you all next?
I have a Bay Area Walls Commission at SF MoMA going up about Vicky Draves in October for Filipino American History Month.
Yeah.
I'm working on, my background is with Arte Povera, because I studied with Germano Chalan. But anyway, so I'm really into materials, and so I've been working on pieces in Japan and Vietnam with lacquer, because I believe that if you put natural lacquer on anything, it becomes Asian. So anyway, so this is what I'm doing. I'm doing these lacquer pieces. I did Covered the Earth, Sherwin-Williams, which is such an idea, right? Pouring paint onto the earth, this toxic material. And so it's really weird. But anyway, so I put the fake lacquer, the Western lacquer first, and then for the dripping, because you can't get dripping from natural lacquer. And then I put the natural lacquer on top of that in terms of cloud formations and things like that. But also I'm thinking about fences, doing some fences and lacquer fences and things like that for separation and extraction and all these things. So that's what I'm working on.
Standing Above the Clouds, the feature, is coming to the Bay Area. It's going to screen at Mill Valley Film Festival, which I don't think has been announced yet, but early October. And then it will also be as part of Kearney Street Workshops Aperture Festival, October 22nd.
That's amazing. Thank you so much to Montalvo, to the ICA. to Judy, to Zoe, to Kelly. Thank you all for coming out. Please hang on. We got much, much more today. And thanks very, very much to our panel here. Jalena Keane Lee, Bruce Yonemoto, Jenifer Wofford.
Thanks, Jeff.